Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Good Lord Bird. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I thought that was kind of interesting, the intro, where it's like basically that conversation. Like, I thought that was kind of interesting that we went back to that dream that Chase had about him being like, oh yeah, he had a dream that basically there were two coffins, one with like the blood and his veins and stuff in one, and then like the other basically being like the skin and flesh, like the hollowed body and stuff like that. I thought that was so interesting considering the fact is what Chase's situation ended up being, like, you know, him dying the way he did, which is, it makes it even sadder in the grand scheme of things, but I thought it was kind of interesting that we went back to that because, you know, Henry had made a whole point, you know, it's like, oh, because you're a girl, men will even tell you about their dreams. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting for you to go back to that. But obviously, like, Henry having that dream and that, you know, lady in front of him was like, is that supposed to be Harriet Tubman? Turned out it totally was. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But obviously, like, him and, you know, John jumping off the train, and it's like, oh yeah, we jumped off the train, never done that before, have you? And it's just like, the kind of like the thrill of it all. But it's like, all right, we're gonna go raise funds, and then we're gonna bring it back to the men and go get ready for the fight and stuff like that. But it's like he's gonna give these speeches and stuff like that to, like, you know, rally up, you know, support. And it's just, you know, talking about, and I love John being like, you know, talking about the plight, you know. Once again, that was a whole argument last episode between him and Frederick. Like, don't talk about the plight of the black man because you've never been through it. Well, not just a black man, like a black person. You've never been that strong. You've never been bound in chains. So who are you to speak on behalf? But he's still kind of doing it to a certain extent because no one's, I mean, other than Frederick, no one's really called him out for it. So I thought it was interesting, like, he made the whole point of, like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, like, the fact is that they beat and do all these terrible things, and then you have Henry being like, well, Dutch actually treated me decent. He never beat me. He actually kept me fed. I actually never slept in the cold until I was with you and your boys. And it's like, all right, you probably don't need to mention that. And then there was another thing like, yeah, I actually never even saw someone murdered until I was with you. He was like, you know, probably don't want to talk about that here. I forgot there was like, I don't remember if that was the second or third thing, but I remember him being like, you know what, probably better just not even mention that subject entirely. I love that whole point because it's just like, once again, it's obviously slavery is a terrible thing, but once again, he's talking from the experience, like it's a situation where, because you don't want like to be like, oh, you want slavery to be this evil thing, like you don't want, you know, someone like Henry saying in a sense to make it seem like slavery is not as bad as you think it is. Like it could come off that way, you know. So obviously, you know, they're giving speeches and stuff like that because they're in Canada. And obviously it was this interesting thing where like people were like, you know, once again, it's that thing. It's a room full of white people being like, yes, yes, in support for everything that John's saying. And obviously, like, I thought it was so interesting because you think, I liked it, like Henry was making this whole point about how, you know, the fact is you would think, you know, because pro-slavers treat, you know, he said like basically not all of them, but some of them treat, you know, their slaves, you know, not a lot of them make a lot of money off of slavery, and then some of them don't treat slaves as bad. They treat slaves the same way they would any other white person they, you know, might know. But it was like, the fact is obviously the way John spun it to be like, oh, that they are just debaucherous human beings, that they are murderers, you know, putting him in a terrible light, which they deserve to be in a terrible light. But then I thought it was so interesting that Henry looks and he sees the one other black person in the room. Neither one of them are talking. It's like, he's like, you're talking for the Negro, but not letting the, you know, the Negro speak for themselves. It's like, because even in this situation, yeah, you're fighting for us, you're speaking for us, but we're not allowed to speak. Both me and this dude in this room know we should keep our mouth shut. You know, it's like, so it shows you kind of like, that even with all the good you're trying to do, it's like when you're trying to speak for a group that you don't represent, it's still that thing of like, you're still the white people in this situation. We still have to keep our mouth shut because, like, yeah, you might be all about, but it's still, we kind of sadly have to quote unquote know our place. It's that kind of thing. So obviously they're rallying up money and stuff like that. And then there's that dude that's kind of like I love the whole thing about like, you know, John being like, yeah, you need to watch out for Fed. You know, it's like, oh, they smell like bear because they use bear grease to swipe their hair and they look clean and they're yellow from the fact that they never go out. And I love Henry being like, that sounds like half the people from the North that we've met, you know? So it's like, how am I supposed to recognize a Fed? But it's like, oh, here's a gun. Like, you know, it's like, so how do you want me to handle this? It's like, like, well, you want me to shoot at a feather? He's like, no. First you hold up, the feather, and then you want to point the gun. He's like, wait, you want me? He's like, no, you fire a warning shot in the air, and then if they try to arrest me, then you need to go point blank range and, shoot them. So I was like, okay. But obviously, like I said, continuing to like rally support and build up money. And there's a guy there that, while he's in the middle of praying, because he's like, oh, for whoever made those sugar cookies, like, oh yeah, like we all want some more. I'm like, once again, it's like I knew he was praying and stuff like that. I knew he was going to be stuck in his mode. I even loved, like, was it Deacon Lee? It's like, because he's got his guns just laying up there and he's slamming it down and his gun's like slowly moving, and the deacon is super uncomfortable. He grabs the gun, but John grabs it and puts it back where it was. It was just, but obviously it turns out this guy is like some strategist or some, like, once again, maybe if I'm well versed in history, I'd know who he was. Maybe he's a nobody, but whatever he is, he's someone of significance to John. He's wrote letters to this dude, and it's like, oh, this guy's he was a military strategist. He'll know how to train our men. So it's like, to the point he's willing to give him every bit of our money. But Henry's like, maybe we should keep some. It's like, no, take all this. And he's like, oh, meet me at this place. They sit there waiting, and it's like, oh, he left this afternoon. He's like, are you sure? She's like, yeah, I'm sure. He's like, no, he couldn't have. Yeah, he did. So it's like, and he asked Henry, how much money was it? It was like $1,700. And it's like, ooh. And it's like, he took all of it? It's like, yeah. Well, you gave all of it to him. And obviously that pissed John off, because it's like, we were fooled by this thief. And it's like, the fact of the matter is, it's like, well, maybe we can rally up money again. People are willing to give pocket change. And that sparks something in John, because he's like, you're right. The fact of the matter is, we're putting a price on this fight for freedom. That people are willing to give pocket change. I thought that scene was going to go to the point of like, yeah, why should they just give us pocket change? We need to rob people. I thought, like, not just rob them. I thought he was going to suggest maybe potentially robbing a bank. That's where I thought that was going. But it's like, no, we need men, not money, And for him, it's like, this is me being full of shit. Because it's like, you are a godsend, Onion. The fact of the matter is, you're so right. And Henry's like, I was? It's like, yeah. And it's like, he's saying all this stuff, and it's like, amen. It's like, amen. So, all right, let's get out of here. The police show up, and it's like, and the way, this is where they're on the way to Canada, because they weren't in Canada yet. No, I don't think they were. No, they definitely were. And then it's like, this way to Canada. And obviously they're making their way there on foot, and obviously he's writing his speech and stuff like that. And for Henry, he gets frustrated because he's like, you're talking about the Negro. He's like, I am a Negro and I'm not free. He's like, what are you talking about? You are free. He's like, no, I haven't been free the entire time I've been with you. And because in John's eyes, it's like, no, like, I bring you along because, I thought, we're family, right? And Henry doesn't say anything. And you can see that kind of breaks John's heart, because he's never thought like, oh, I'm dragging you along. But obviously for like Henry, it's just like everything I've been through, like jumping off trains, this and that. Like, you talk about me being free, but why is it I'm following every order you say? You make it seem like that's not really freedom. And so when they actually do get to Canada, he talks to Henry, and I thought it was this beautiful moment of him realizing like, oh yeah, I messed up, but he's like, I want you to understand why I do what I do. Like, the fact of the matter is, you have always been free, but the fact of the matter is, he talks about the fact is that he has a tendency to hold tight to people. Like, he does it with his own sons, and it's just like, as a parent, he holds on too tight. It's like, I bet you miss your pa. He's like, and that was my fault. Like, your dad was taken from you. Like, I kind of forced freedom on you. You never had a vote in this whole situation. And you can see it, like, resonate with Henry, what John's saying. And I thought, it's like, can I ask for your forgiveness? It's like, because you are like family, because you are important to me, I held on a little too tight. Like I would my own sons, as I did with my sons, I held them a little too tight, because obviously it's I can't remember if that came up beforehand, but obviously the whole thing about like, well, I think it comes up later on during the speech, but I'll circle to it soon enough. But I thought, he was like, can I ask you forgiveness? And Henry was like, you said we were all forgiven, right? So it's like, if you ever make your way a certain way, maybe you should stop by the farm, to see my wife and my daughters, And you can tell John's like heartbroken because it's like I enjoyed having your company, and him kind of walking along. I'm like, oh, I was like, oh, so are you going to be split apart again for some time? I was curious because obviously for Henry, it's like, yeah, I have my freedom. It's like this is kind of what I wanted, but at the same, I think it's that situation of like you feel a little bad because it's like him saying what he said still resonate, but it's still the thing of I'm black, I want my freedom, you know. And obviously, it's like, oh, I even love that thing of like, oh yeah, the sister's there. I mean, a Christian church. I mean, well, they're Catholic, but we can't judge them. I love that little slight. Like they're kind, they're good people at the end of the day. That's all that matters, is what he was kind of saying. But he's giving his speech in front of a whole bunch of black folk in Canada, and talking about his circumstances. About the fact of the matter is, why did this fight come to him? He's like, for 50 years of my life, basically, my dad raised me one way. It seems like his father was a godly man, so he became a godly man. He passed that on to his children, and it talked about like basically his dad's values were passed on to him. He passed those same values on to his treat everyone right, and his sons went off to have their own lives, but basically the injustices of this world, some people not willing to see black folk as equal, and people white folk who side with them ended up burning down their like farms and stuff like that. And for him, it's just like John was kind of like, I had enough, because it's a thing of, it's like a peaceful, abolishes essentially was kind of what he was kind of going about at first. It seems like that's kind of the route his dad put him on, but it's like going non-violent. It's like violence is the only way to respond. It's like, it's not the way, and it's something we all don't want, but it's kind of, we have little choice in this because it's the only way we're going to get it through their heads about the way they operate. Like the fact of the matter is, and Henry being there, and even despite everything, it took this moment to make Henry, I think, really resonate, because I think prior to now, like, I think maybe that conversation with Henry sparked something in him to speak a little bit more from the heart. And I think hearing all that shifted Henry. Like, Henry was just kind of bouncing back and forth, And I thought that was so interesting because I think but in this moment, I think it kind of was swaying him a little bit more. He was getting rallied up. And because I think beforehand he had never really listened, but maybe because it's a room of black people who are listening, who are also getting riled up because they understand where he's coming from. They believe in the message that he's trying to get across. That maybe beforehand, because it's you in this room placating the white people who are going to get the funds, but are they really in it for the fight? These are people who are part of this fight. This is their fight for their freedom. So it's like, that room is different. That energy is different. What's saying those words hit differently, because I think he was saying stuff he had never said before. Or maybe not, because anytime we were getting his speeches, we were only getting some of it because Henry wasn't really listening. But I think in this moment, Henry was, because he had said it before, and it's like, oh, like, I've heard everything that Mr. Brown has to say, but it's like, no. In this moment, it's just kind of like, whoa, like, so that's the question. Was he even really listening before? Was he listening with new ears, or was it John finally saying something with weight and with gravitas? I don't know. It could be either or. It could be a combination of the two. But when the time came, though, and he was just like, all right, sign up, because everyone was getting rallied about the fight, but it's like, but tell us your plan. And he was like, but, I need you, kind of basically trust me. I've got some plan, but I can't really give you too many details. And they're like, well, we need to know, because we don't really know you. Like, how are you going to tell us because it's like, oh, I was, for someone, it's like, I fought tooth and nail to get to where I am to be free. And you want me to, like, my life means something. So I'm not quick to just throw it away. But then Harriet Tubman walks in, which I think is so interesting because Henry had a dream about her. I don't know if there's something related to this, any like folklore or tales about her having visions. But obviously it's just interesting because that reminds me of like Timeless, because in Timeless, Harriet Tubman had visions, kind of, if I remember correctly. They made a point of that. So that part of me wonders, is that some of like the folklore, is that some of the tales about her? Like, I'll admit I'm ignorant on, because I know the bare minimum about Harriet Tubman. I don't know much about her life and who she was. I know what she did, but even then, I'm sure what I know of her, which obviously being like the Underground Railroad, but even then, it's only a small portion of her story, and it's kind of crazy to think about that, like knowing only so little of someone's life, a full life. Obviously, like any life, it's struggles, it's pains, but the fights that you endured, the fights that you fought because no one else could. It's just interesting. But she got up there and was talking about the fact is calling these people out because it's like, and I thought was, I guess like her and John have enough of a rapport, or maybe she learned this from Douglas, but it's like this man like left behind his wife and daughters back on their farm starving. The fact of the matter is he has been whipped, but he managed to kill. I mean, he's still standing up. And the fact of the matter is, he's not doing, like, he shed, like, because he made the whole point of, like, shedding blood with his African brothers, you know, shedding blood for them, you know? And it's like, he even lost a son to this cause, Frederick, you know? So it's like showing you, like, he's all in, but you don't want to jeopardize your freedom, your lives, and, you know, he's not asking you to, like, pay up some money or something. He's asking you to fight not for him, for yourselves, for your freedom. And I thought that was such a powerful thing because it even resonated with Henry because he was like, yeah, he admitted himself. He's like, I didn't want to die. You know, he's like, I like the thought of someone taking care of me, you know. So for him, it's just like, you know, pushing aside, because it's a hard thing to ask someone when you have a life that you're, when you have it good, it's hard to be like, yeah, I'm willing to cast that aside. But it's like, I know who John is. You know who I am. That in itself should be enough. But because it's like you still have brothers and sisters and people you care about still trapped in slavery, and yet you're here. Because the thing is, it's not just about you. You're here being able to enjoy the perks of your freedom. Other people are not. So the fact of the matter is, you know, for her, she even says this later on to Henry, and I thought was so interesting that basically, obviously, it's for the slave it's the slave before you, and it's for the slave after you, that this fight, why it's so important. And obviously, it's like, you know, John, do you have a date? And he's like, I do. She's like, don't change that date for anything, which makes me wonder, does that date change, and is that what changes, you know, and everything. But obviously, it's like, you know, from the dream, and obviously we see it here, Harriet being like, who are you? What are you? And Henry, because Henry was the first one to be like, I'm with you. And he did it in kind of a squeaky voice, you know. But he's like, I'm with the captain all the way, and signs up. And obviously, all these other people sign up. Once again, those names that are mentioned, they're probably significant names. But like I said, I am ignorant to a lot of history. You know, I'll even sadly admit, like, it's nothing to be proud of admitting it. I don't want it to come off like that. Like, I am not well versed in Black history like I should be too. Like, I feel like not just American history, just world history in general. I know bits and pieces, but even then, I feel like I should know a lot more than I do. But especially Black history, I feel like there is this responsibility within myself to know more, you know? So, but, I went on a little bit of a tangent, I'm sorry. Well, it connects regardless, but, obviously, like, Henry was like, I don't really know what I am, but it's still the thing of, you know, be by the general's side, be by the captain's side, because he's going to need you. Even giving Henry that troll, being like, you know, I forgot what she was saying, but saying that basically he could end up using it in the future. But obviously, we also have... Right, the whole point I was making before I kind of lost a little track was like the fact that we get people joined up, a dude who can draw maps, two people who are just kind of like, I don't know I forgot what they describe themselves as, but they're almost basically like engineers. So, and then there's also that other dude, Cook, which is kind of like, obviously it seems like he's a part of this for the wrong reason, because he got like, oh yeah, the hype and stuff like that. He's like, oh, will there be whiskey? And it's like, no. Will there be women? No. We're here freeing people. And it's almost kind of like he's only there for like the accolades, and just, you know, that's why I'm kind of like, he seems super effing suspicious. But, you know, maybe there's something more to that. Like I said, you know, maybe there's some history stuff there that I'm like completely ignorant of, obviously. But obviously John gave Harriet the date, because he knew the date, and she's like, compromise your own life before compromising the date, because that date's so important. Because obviously, talking about the Civil War, it's like there's so much at stake here. You better, basically, if it comes down to it, to make sure that date stays the same, you need to sacrifice your own life to make sure, like, whatever you need to do not change that date. It's kind of the whole point. And obviously I thought it was kind of interesting too, because at the end of the episode, well, not the end of the episode, but as the episode's kind of narrowing it down, like, obviously, like, he's on the train, you know, concocting his plan, bringing it up to Henry, Onion. And obviously at the same time, we flip back to, like, him doing it in front of everyone they've just recruited, in front of his sons and everything else. And I even love Bob being like, oh, the cheese has finally slid off your biscuit. Because obviously even some of his sons were kind of reluctant, because some of them were like, yeah, the whole point of this was to be like, you know, kind of spread, you know, they had an approach from the beginning, but now they're going about this differently. Like, he's concocting this plan. And even then, I feel like this is the most lucid we've ever really seen John, because him concocting this plan of like this and that, I'm like, oh shit, this is like a completely different man. But I guess it's like the cause is so there, like the fact is he's a Frederick Douglass's backing, he has, you know, Harriet's backing, that the fact it matters, it's like we cannot fail, this is too important. I think everything, because even the whole situation with Onion being like, at the end of the day, Onion, it's your choice whether you fight or not. It has to come down to you. And, you know, Henry's like, I'm with you, and holds out his hand, you know. But even his sons too, being like, we're with you all the way, you know. It's like, one of his sons like, I'll bring my wife, and the other one's kind of like, you know, it's like, you said that our blood is one, and the fact is that I rather, you know, I think we'd all be best, you know, dying together. If it comes down to it, because it's like, obviously it's like, this is, you know, even Bob said, we're going up against a whole bunch of white people that are heavily armed and everything, but it's like, at the end of the day, you know, it's like, why not just stay here in Kansas? It's like, Kansas is just a tail, we need to go to, I think it was to Virginia, where it's the head. Basically, it's like, you know, going after, you know, you got to cut off the head of the serpent, you know, because going at the tail will only get you so far. Like, we need to kind of, like, go at this from head on, you know. So everyone's kind of signed up for it, you know, ready to kind of put this into action, because it's like, there's going to be a lot of blood and there's going to be a lot of death, but it's like, you know, everyone's down for this cause. So I'm really interested to see where things kind of go. We've set this plan up, whether everything really goes as planned. Obviously, we know, because of what Henry said last episode, that Frederick kind of screwed things up. Now, in what manner and what was the situation that led that, I'm curious. And is it historic? Like, obviously, it's like the whole thing about, once again, there's history here mixed with fiction, because it's just like a very like hyperbolized version of history, like other things, you know. So, but I'm curious to see where this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.